Guard Park Hyman walked slowly toward the rampaging Brutanian while every other guard in the prison was running in the opposite direction. The massive creature called Gorks stood in the middle of the destroyed corridor throwing pieces of broken metal around like toys. His gray rock skin was covered in scratches from fighting, and his eyes glowed red with anger. The alien guards were setting up energy barriers and loading their plasma weapons. They called for backup teams and activated emergency protocols. Security robots rolled into position with their weapons ready. The entire prison was treating this like a war zone, but Hyman just walked up to a bench that was bolted to the wall about 20 feet away from Gorks and sat down. He crossed his legs and leaned back like he was waiting for a friend to show up for lunch. Gorks was in the middle of picking up a heavy security door that had been torn off its hinges when he noticed the small human sitting nearby. He stopped what he was doing and stared. The Brutanian had never seen anything like this before. Every other guard who saw him angry either shot at him or ran away. The human said in perfect Brutanian language, "You look frustrated." Gorks was so surprised he almost dropped the metal door. The human was speaking his native language, but more than that, the human sounded like he actually cared. Gorks had been in this prison for 2 years and nobody had ever asked how he felt about anything. "You are not afraid?" the massive prisoner rumbled in confusion. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "Why would I be afraid?" Hyman shrugged, like talking to 12-foot-tall monsters was something he did every day. "My grandmother used to wrestle tigers for fun back on Earth. You remind me of her, strong, proud, probably just tired of being locked up with nobody who understands youth." Other guards watching through the security cameras could not believe what they were seeing. The most dangerous prisoner in the facility was having a conversation instead of trying to kill someone. "I could crush you without even trying, little human," Gork said, but his voice was quieter, now less angry. "Probably," Hyman agreed, nodding seriously. "But you will not know how I know, because you have been in here for 2 years and you only break out when you are really upset about something specific. What happened today? What made you so angry?" Gorks slowly lowered the metal door he had been holding. His massive shoulders slumped, and for the first time he looked tired instead of dangerous. "The food," he said quietly. "They gave me silithium protein paste again. It makes my stomach burn like acid. I asked the kitchen for Brutanian rock salt meal, but they said it costs too much money for prisoners." Jimin nodded like this was the most reasonable thing in the world. "That is not right at all. Your species needs certain minerals in your food or you get sick, right? Like how humans need vitamin C. Or we get a disease called scurvy. I will talk to the kitchen staff about getting you proper food, but first, how about we walk back to your cell and I show you some earth wrestling moves? I bet you have never seen how humans fight when we cannot rely on being big and strong." Gorks tilted his massive head curiously. "Earth fighting? You mean your species fights even though you are so small?" All the time Hyman grinned. "We had to learn because everything else on our planet was bigger and stronger than us." "Want to see what happened next?" Made every guard in the prison question everything they thought they knew about security. Hyman stood up and started showing Gorks basic wrestling moves. The human demonstrated how to use leverage and momentum instead of pure strength. He showed how smaller fighters could throw larger opponents by using their own weight against them. Gorks watched with growing excitement. Nobody had ever taught him anything before. Prison was usually about punishment and control, but here was this tiny human showing him techniques that his own people had never developed on Brutania. "We just grab and squeeze harder," Gork said as he carefully tried to copy one of Hyman's moves. His massive hands were surprisingly gentle as he practiced the technique that works when you are the strongest thing around. Hyman explained, "But humans had to fight creatures that were stronger, faster, and more dangerous than us. So we learned to be smarter instead." "Watch this." Jimin demonstrated a move where he used an opponent's forward momentum to throw them over his shoulder. Even though Gorks was being very careful not to hurt the human, he found himself flipping through the air and landing on his back. He started laughing, a deep rumbling sound that echoed through the corridor. "How did you do that?" "I was trying to be gentle, but you still threw me." "Practice," Hyman said, helping the massive alien back to his feet. "Lots and lots of practice. When you grow up on a world where everything wants to eat you, you learn to use your brain more than your muscles." They walked back toward Gorks's cell, talking about fighting techniques and training methods. The Brutanian was fascinated by the idea that humans had developed entire fighting systems. based on being smaller and weaker than their opponents. Your Earth sounds very dangerous, Gork said as they reached his cell door. It is, Himan agreed. But that made us very good at adapting to new situations and understanding different types of problems. As Gorks voluntarily walked back into his cell, he turned to ask one more question. Will you really talk to the kitchen about my food? I promise, Himan said, and tomorrow I will bring some information about human nutrition. Maybe we can figure out what Earth foods might work for your digestive system too. After the cell door closed, Gork sat on his bed with the biggest smile anyone had seen from him in 2 years. For the first time since arriving at the prison, he felt like someone actually saw him as a person instead of just a problem to solve. The alien guards watching from the security station were completely silent. They had just witnessed the most violent prisoner in the facility voluntarily return to his cell after having a friendly conversation with a guard who carried no weapons and used no force. Captain Kim Hanna found Himan walking back through the corridors looking perfectly calm. How did you know that would work? She asked. I did not know, Himan admitted, but I figured he was probably angry for a good reason. Most people do not break out of prison just for fun, especially when they know they will get in more trouble. They do it when they feel like nobody cares about them as a living being. What made you think to talk about food? He is a big guy, and big guys usually need to eat a lot of the right things. When I was reading about Brutanian biology yesterday, I learned they need special minerals that most other species cannot digest. If the kitchen has been feeding him standard prison food for 2 years, his body is probably in constant pain. You read about Brutanian biology yesterday? Jimin nodded. I read about all the species we might be working with. I figured understanding them was more important than learning how to fight them. Captain Hanna smiled proudly. This was exactly why humans had been requested for this assignment, not because they were strong or fast or had good weapons, but because they had learned to see problems differently. Down in the security office, Warden Talon was staring at the monitors showing Gorks peacefully reading a book in his cell. The same prisoner who had injured 6 guards in the past month was now calm and cooperative after a 20-minute conversation with a human who had no special training in prisoner control. Maybe these humans knew something that the rest of the galaxy had not figured out yet. And in Block 9, a Shadowkin prisoner named Nethys, who could walk through walls, was watching the security footage on her cell monitor. She had been planning another escape attempt for tonight, but now she was curious about these strange new guards who seemed more interested in talking than fighting. Perhaps it would be interesting to wait and see what happened next. The massive prison station floated in the dark space above planet Kepler 442b. Like a giant metal monster, the station was so big that small ships looked like tiny insects flying around it. Inside this prison were the most dangerous criminals from across the galaxy. Aliens from dozens of different worlds were locked up here for crimes that made even hardened soldiers shake with fear. Warden Talon stood in his office, looking out at the endless stars through the thick metal glass. His 8 spider legs clicked nervously on the floor as he read the latest reports. 3 more guards had quit yesterday. 2 others were in the medical bay with broken bones, and another prisoner had tried to escape by melting through the wall with his bare hands. For 3 years, Talon had been running this prison, and for 3 years, it had been nothing but problems. Every alien species he hired as guards either ran away scared or got hurt badly. The Gorillian guards were strong as mountains, but the prisoners outsmarted them. The Quillian guards were fast as lightning, but they got overwhelmed when prisoners worked together. The Zentari guards had powerful energy weapons, but prisoners found ways around their technology. The door to his office opened with a soft hiss. A small figure walked in wearing a simple gray uniform. Captain Kim Hanna of the Human Guard. Kors stood barely 5.5 feet tall. Her black hair was tied back in a neat ponytail, and her dark eyes looked calm and confident. Behind her walked 20 more humans, all dressed in the same simple uniform. Selene had seen pictures of humans before, but seeing them in person was different. They looked so small and fragile compared to the massive alien guards he was used to. Their equipment was basic: 2 simple metal batons, cloth uniforms, and what looked like primitive communication devices. No energy shields, no plasma weapons, no advanced technology at all. How could these tiny, soft creatures possibly handle prisoners that had defeated his strongest warriors? Captain Hanna stopped in front of his desk and gave a respectful bow. Her team lined up behind her in perfect formation. There was guard Park Hyman, a young man with kind eyes who kept looking around. The office with curiosity guard Lee Tae-young stood quietly reading something on a small device. Guard Choi Yuna had her arms crossed and was studying the prison layout on the wall. Other guards filled out the group, all looking surprisingly calm. For people about to work in the most dangerous prison in the galaxy, Warden, I must warn you, Talon began, his voice clicking with worry. We have lost 47 guards in the past year. The prisoners here are not ordinary criminals. Block 7 houses Brutanian warriors who can crush steel with their bare hands. They come from a world with 10 times normal gravity, and they are strong enough to tear through metal doors. He gestured with one of his spider arms toward the prison sections. Block 9 contains Shadowkin assassins who can turn their bodies into shadow and walk through solid walls. We have tried every type of lock and barrier, but they escape whenever they want. Block 12 has Pyrothian fire breathers who can melt anything they touch with flames hot enough to turn rock into liquid. The human guards listened quietly. None of them looked scared or worried. Talon found this very strange. Most new guards asked lots of questions or demanded to see the advanced weapons they would use. These humans just stood there waiting patiently. Are you certain your human guards can handle this? Talon asked Captain Kim directly. Your species has no natural armor, no energy weapons, no special powers. How do you plan to control prisoners that have defeated warriors twice your size? Captain Hana smiled, a small quiet smile that somehow made Talon feel less worried. Warden, we did not come here to fight them. We came here to understand the other alien staff members in the office whispered to each other in confusion. Understand them? What did that mean? How could understanding help against creatures that could break bones with their bare hands? Talon had heard strange stories about humans and their home planet Earth. The planet was classified as a death world by the Galactic Council. Only the most dangerous and adaptable species could survive on worlds like that. Most civilized species came from safe, peaceful planets where the biggest danger was bad weather, but Earth was different. Everything on Earth seemed designed to kill anything that lived there. Let me show you around the prison, Talon said finally. Maybe seeing the prisoners will help you understand what you are dealing with. They walked through the main corridors of the prison. The walls were thick metal reinforced with energy barriers. Every few meters there were security checkpoints with armed guards. The lighting was bright and harsh, making everything look cold and unwelcoming. Other guards they passed stared at the human team. Some looked curious, others looked worried. A few laughed quietly, thinking these small, soft creatures would not last a week. As they walked, Captain Hannah asked questions, but not the ones Talon expected. Instead of asking about weapons or security systems, she asked about the prisoners themselves. What planets do they come from? What are their natural behaviors? How long have they been in prison? Do they have families back home? Her team spread out slightly as they walked. Guard Park Hyman stopped to talk with an alien janitor in what sounded like perfect Gorillian language. Guard Lee Tae-young was reading something that looked like poetry. Guard Choi Yuna was studying the air circulation system and asking technical questions about how different species breathed. They seemed more interested in learning about the prison as a place where people lived rather than just a place where criminals were locked up. Suddenly, red lights began flashing throughout the corridor. A loud alarm started blaring. Emergency sirens echoed off the metal walls. Computer voices announced in multiple languages, prisoner escape in Block 7. All guards report to emergency stations. Code red lockdown initiated. Alien guards ran past them carrying heavy weapons and wearing thick armor. They shouted orders to each other and activated energy shields. Their boots clanged loudly on the metal floor as they rushed toward the emergency. Through the security monitors on the walls, everyone could see what was happening. A massive Brutanian prisoner had broken out of his cell. The creature stood 12 feet tall with skin that looked like gray rock. His arms were thick as tree trunks and his hands could crush metal. His name was Gorks, and he was throwing other guards around like they were children. 3 Quillian guards lay on the floor unconscious. Their scale armor was cracked and broken. Gorks had already destroyed 2 security barriers and was reaching for a weapon that had been dropped by a fleeing guard. His roar echoed through the prison halls, making even the bravest guards step back. Security teams surrounded the area, but nobody wanted to get too close. Gorks had been in the prison for 2 years, and every time he got angry, someone got hurt badly. The last time he broke out, it took 6 guards with energy nets to bring him down, and even then 2 guards ended up in the medical bay for weeks, Warden. Talon turned to the human guards, expecting them to ask for weapons or backup, or at least look worried. Instead, he saw Guard Park Hyman walking calmly toward the emergency area. Where are you going? Talon called out. That prisoner is extremely dangerous. You need weapons and armor. Park Hyman looked back with the same calm expression. To talk with him. Talk with him. Talon could not believe what he was hearing. Nobody talks with Gorks when he is angry. He only understands force. But the young human was already walking away toward the most dangerous prisoner in the galaxy, carrying nothing but his simple uniform and a calm smile. The other human guards watched, but did not try to stop him. They seemed to trust that he knew what he was doing. Talon followed quickly, his 8 legs clicking rapidly on the floor. This was either going to be the shortest assignment in prison history, or something very interesting was about to happen. And deep down in his spider gut, he had a feeling it was going to be very interesting indeed. Block 9 was the most frustrating section of the entire prison. This was where they kept the escape artists and the prisoners who seemed impossible to contain. The most famous resident was a Shadowkin named Nephes, who had escaped 17 times. In the past year, Shadowkin were one of the strangest species in the galaxy. They looked like living shadows with glowing purple eyes that seemed to float in the darkness. Their most dangerous ability was phasing, which meant they could turn their bodies incorporeal and walk right through solid walls, energy barriers, and even force fields. The prison had tried everything to keep Nephes contained. They built quantum locks that could detect dimensional shifts. They hired psychic guards who could read thoughts. They even brought in technology from the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Nothing worked. At Nephes would wait patiently in her cell for days or weeks, acting like a model prisoner. Then when the guards relaxed their watch, she would simply phase through the wall and disappear. It usually took hours to find her again, and sometimes she made it all the way to the docking bay before being recaptured. Every escape made the security teams more frustrated and more desperate. They added more cameras, more sensors, more guards, but Nephes always found a way. The other prisoners had started calling her the Ghost, and even the guards were beginning to think she was impossible to contain. Guard Li Taeyong was assigned to Block 9 on his second day at the prison. Unlike the previous guards who watched Nephes constantly through cameras and motion sensors, he did something completely different. He brought a chair, set it up outside her cell, and started reading a book. Not a security manual or prisoner file or tactical guide. He was reading what looked like poetry. The other guards thought he was crazy or lazy, sitting there reading while the most dangerous escape artist in the galaxy was just a few feet away. But Taeyong seemed completely relaxed, turning pages slowly and occasionally making notes in the margins. After 3 hours of this unusual behavior, Nephes finally spoke. What are you reading, human? Her voice sounded like wind blowing through empty spaces. Poetry from your homeworld. Actually, Taeyong replied without looking up. The Lamentations of the Lost Moon. It is beautiful, but also very sad. Nephes moved closer to the transparent wall that separated them from the physical world. She had not heard anyone mention her homeworld in years, let alone someone who knew about Shadowkin literature. You can read our script? She asked in surprise. Shadowkin writing looked like flowing darkness against light backgrounds. Most species could not even see it properly. I learned it last week, Taeyong said, finally looking up from his book. Your people have amazing literature. This poem about the shadow dancer who lost her way between dimensions. It reminds me of human stories about people feeling trapped between different worlds. Nobody had spoken to Nephes about art or culture or anything from her home world since she had been imprisoned. 2 years of being treated like a dangerous object instead of a person with thoughts and feelings. It felt strange to have someone actually interested in her species beyond their escape abilities. What kind of human stories? She found herself asking. Stories about people who feel like they do not belong anywhere, Taeyong explained, like immigrants who leave their home country but never quite fit in their new one, or children who grow up between 2 different cultures. Sometimes humans feel like we are phasing between worlds, too, just not literally like Eucanathes had never thought about it that way, but the comparison made sense. Shadowkin naturally existed partially in multiple dimensions at once. It was why they could phase, but it also meant they often felt disconnected from purely physical beings. The next few hours passed quickly as they talked about poetry philosophy and the loneliness of being different. Taeyong shared human literature that dealt with themes of isolation and searching for belonging. Nethys found herself explaining Shadowkin art forms that used light and shadow to express emotions. Do you ever feel homesick? Taeyong asked gently. Every day, Nethys admitted. I dream about the shadow gardens where I grew up. The way light and darkness dance together there. Here everything is so harsh and bright and solid. I understand. Taeyong nodded. On Earth, I grew up in a small village surrounded by mountains. When I first left to join the space program, I felt lost for months. Everything was too big, too fast, too complicated. Why did you leave? To help people, Taeyong said simply, just like. Now that evening, other guards were amazed to see that Nethys had not attempted to escape. She had spent the entire day talking with the human guard about art and literature. When the night shift asked if she needed anything, she said something that shocked everyone. I am fine here. Someone finally sees me as a person instead of just a problem to solve. Word spread quickly through the prison that another dangerous prisoner had been calmed by simple conversation. The alien guards were beginning to realize that these humans had a completely different approach to security. Over the next few days, Taeyong continued bringing books and poetry to read during his shifts. He learned more about Shadowkin culture and shared stories about human experiences. Nethys stopped planning escape attempts because for the first time in years she had something more interesting to do. She started teaching Taeyong about Shadowkin philosophy, which said that existence was about finding balance between light and shadow, physical and spiritual, individual and universal. He shared human ideas about finding meaning through connection with others. The other prisoners in Block 9 noticed the change. Some of them started asking their guards about books or music or news from their homeworlds. They wanted what Nethys had found, someone who treated them like complete beings instead of just security risks. Captain Kim Hana observed this transformation with interest. Taeyong had not used any special technology or weapons or training techniques. He had simply taken time to learn about who Nethys was as a person and what mattered to her. When Warden Talon asked how he had convinced the most escape-prone prisoner to stop escaping, Taeyong gave a simple answer. She was not trying to escape from the prison, she was trying to escape from loneliness. Once she found connection, she did not need to run anymore. The success in Block 9 proved what Captain Hana had suspected from the beginning. The prisoners were not just criminals to be contained, they were intelligent beings from different worlds with different needs and different ways of understanding reality. If you treated them like people instead of problems, they responded like people. If you showed interest in their cultures and experiences, they showed interest in cooperating. If you gave them connection instead of isolation, they chose community over escape. But the real test was still coming. Block 12 housed the most physically dangerous prisoner in the entire facility, a Pyrothean named Zephyr, whose flames burned hot enough to melt the prison walls themselves. Tomorrow, guard Choi Yuna would find out if human understanding could work against a creature made of living fire. Block 12 was the most heavily protected section in the entire prison. The walls were made of reinforced titanium steel with heat-resistant coatings that could withstand temperatures hot enough to melt most metals. The air was kept extra cold and dry to prevent any accidental fires. In the center of this frozen block was a special containment cell that looked more like a torture chamber than a prison. The cell was surrounded by cooling systems that pumped freezing air constantly. The temperature inside was kept just above the point where a Pyrothean would die from cold exposure. Inside this icy prison lived Zephyr, the most dangerous fire breather in the galaxy. His species, the Pyrotheans, were living creatures made of controlled flame and molten rock. Their bodies naturally burned at temperatures that could melt steel, and their breath could turn solid stone into liquid. Zephyr had been in the freezing cell for 8 months. He had injured 6 guards during his capture and destroyed 3 different cell designs before the prison built this cooling chamber. The constant cold was slowly killing his spirit, but it was the only way to keep him from burning through the walls. Every previous guard assigned to Block 12 stayed as far away from Zephyr's cell as possible. They watched him through remote cameras and only approached when absolutely necessary, wearing full environmental suits. The prisoner was considered too dangerous for direct interaction, but guard Choi Yuna had a different plan. On her first day in Block 12, She did something that made every other guard think she had lost her mind. She sat down just outside the safe zone around Zephyr's cell and started building a small campfire she used. Old-fashioned earth techniques that humans had known for thousands of years, rubbing two dry sticks together until they created sparks, then carefully feeding the tiny flames with paper and small pieces of wood, building the fire slowly and patiently, until it was burning steadily. "What are you doing?" Human Zephyr asked from inside his freezing cell. His voice sounded like crackling flames mixed with burning logs making fire the way my ancestors did. Yuna replied as she added another small stick. To her campfire, my grandmother taught me that fire is not just about destruction, it is about warmth, cooking food, bringing people together. On Earth, we gather around fires to tell stories and share experiences. Zephyr pressed against the transparent wall of his cell, watching in fascination. He had never seen someone create fire so carefully, so respectfully. Most beings were either afraid of fire or wanted to use it as a weapon. This human was treating it like something precious. Your species makes fire without internal organs? He asked in amazement. How is that possible? We are not born with fire inside us like you are. Yuna explained, so we had to learn to make it ourselves. We discovered that fire needs three things: fuel, oxygen, and heat. When you have all three in the right balance, fire comes to life. She showed him how friction between the sticks created heat, how the dry wood provided fuel, and how blowing gently gave the flames oxygen. Zephyr understood these concepts instinctively, because his body was a living example of combustion, but he had never thought about them scientifically. "This is amazing," he said, leaning forward as much as his restraints would allow. "On Parothia, fire just exists. We never had to think about how to create it." "That must be wonderful," Yuna said, "but also lonely. Fire has been central to human civilization for hundreds of thousands of years. It shaped our evolution, our culture, our technology. We learned to cook food, which changed how our brains developed. We used fire to keep warm, which let us live in colder places. We gathered around fires, which helped us form community style." "Me about your fire?" Yuna asked. "What is it like to have flames as part of your body?" Zephyr was quiet for a long moment. Nobody had ever asked him about his fire in a positive way. Guards usually only talked about it as a threat or a weapon. "For my people, fire is the extension of our souls," he said finally. "It is how we express emotions, communicate with each other, create art. When Parothians are happy, our flames dance. When we are sad, they burn low and blue. When we love someone, our fire resonates with theirs." "That sounds beautiful," Yuna said, and she meant it. "But this cooling system must be terrible for you." "It is not just uncomfortable, is it?" Zephyr looked surprised that she understood. "It is slowly killing my spirit," he admitted. "Parothians need to flame regularly, or we become depressed and violent. The constant cold makes me feel like I'm suffocating from the inside. My flames want to burn bright and free, but instead they are trapped and dying. I'm going to talk to the warden about this," Yuna said immediately. "No being should have their essential nature suppressed like that. It would be like forcing humans to stop breathing." "You would do that for me?" Zephyr asked in disbelief. "Of course," she replied. "You are not just a dangerous prisoner. You are a living being with needs and feelings. If we can find a safe way for you to express your natural abilities, everyone will be better off." The next day, Yuna presented a detailed plan to Warden Talon. She had researched Pyrothian biology and psychology and worked with the engineering team to design a safe flaming chamber. It would be a special room with heat resistant walls where Zephyr could burn freely for short periods under supervision. The engineering team said it was possible, but expensive. Warden Talon was worried about the safety risks, but the recent successes with other prisoners made him willing to try. Within a week, they had built a small flaming chamber next to Zephyr's cell every day. Yuna would escort him to the chamber where he could let his flames burn bright and free for 30 minutes. The transformation was immediate and dramatic. Zephyr went from being violent and unpredictable to calm and cooperative. His flames, which had been dim and angry, now burned with beautiful colors that shifted like a sunset. He started creating flame sculptures and fire dances that were actually artistic expressions. He taught Yuna about Pyrothian culture and art forms. She learned that his species used controlled burning to create complex visual displays that told stories and expressed emotions. In return, she shared human fire traditions like candle making, glass blowing, and metalworking. The other guards were amazed to see Zephyr creating beautiful flame art instead of trying to melt his way out of prison. His cooperation level went from 0 to 100% practically overnight. One day, while they were sitting by Yuna's small campfire, Zephyr asked her why humans were so different from other species. "I think it is because Earth taught us that surviving is not about being the strongest or most powerful," she said. "It is about understanding your environment and adapting to it. We learned that working with nature is more effective than fighting against it. So, when you see prisoners, you do not see enemies to defeat. We see people who are struggling in an environment that does not meet their needs," she explained. "If we can change the environment to better suit them, everyone benefits." Zephyr nodded slowly, his flames flickering thoughtfully. "Other species try to force us to fit their systems, but you change your systems to fit us." "Exactly." Yuna smiled, "and it works better for everyone." That night, Zephyr used his flames to create a spectacular light show visible through the transparent walls of the flaming chamber. Other prisoners and guards gathered to watch as he painted pictures with fire, telling the story of how a small human had given him back his spirit. Word of the success in Block 12 spread throughout the prison. 3 of the most dangerous prisoners in the facility had been transformed from violent threats into cooperative individuals simply by treating them as people instead of problems. But the biggest test was still coming. Block 15 housed a pack of Luparian prisoners who had been working together to plan coordinated escape attempts. Their pack mentality made them more dangerous than any individual prisoner, and tomorrow guards Kim Hana and Park Jiwoo would find out if human understanding could work against creatures who hunted as a team. Block 15 was designed like a fortress within the prison. Multiple layers of security barriers separated the cells from the main corridors. Armed guards patrolled in groups of 6 or more. Emergency lockdown procedures could seal the entire section in seconds. This level of security existed for one reason: the Luparian Pacloparians looked like 7-foot-tall wolves who walked upright on 2 legs. They had thick gray fur, sharp claws, and yellow eyes that seemed to see everything. Their species had evolved as pack hunters on a world where teamwork meant survival. Alone, a Luparian was dangerous, but together they were nearly unstoppable. Pack in Block 15 consisted of 8 prisoners led by an alpha male named Fang. They had been captured together after a coordinated attack on a military supply depot, and they had been planning escape attempts together ever since. Previous guards had tried to break up the pack by separating them into individual cells in different sections, but this only made them more aggressive and desperate. They would howl to communicate across the prison, coordinate hunger strikes, and attack guards in organized waves. The prison administration finally gave up and housed them together, thinking it would be easier to contain them in one place, but the pack used their time together to plan increasingly sophisticated escape attempts. They had already tried digging through walls, working together to overload security systems, and creating diversions. While some members scouted escape routes, the pack had injured more guards than any other group in the prison. They fought with military precision, using coordinated attacks that overwhelmed individual guards. Their pack loyalty meant they would sacrifice themselves to help other members escape. Guards Kim Hana and Park Jiwoo were assigned to Block 15 together. The prison administration thought 2 guards might be safer than 1, but they were still worried. Captain Hana had requested detailed files on Luparian social structure and behavior, but nobody understood why. Instead of treating the pack like a group of individual criminals, Hana and Jiwoo approached them as a social unit. They spent hours reading about Luparian culture, hierarchy, systems, and communication methods. They learned the meaning of different howls, body postures, and scent markings. On their first day in Block 15, something unprecedented happened. Captain Hana approached the pack area and gave the traditional Luparian respect gesture. She lowered her head slightly, showed her empty hands, and made a soft whining sound that meant peaceful approach. The entire pack stopped what they were doing and stared. Every other species that worked in the prison treated them like dangerous animals, but this small human was acknowledging them according to their own cultural protocols. Alpha Fang, the pack leader, moved forward slowly. His yellow eyes studied Hana carefully. He could smell that she was not afraid, which confused him. Most beings showed fear when approaching Luparian. He said in a deep, growling voice, "You know our greeting customs." "I know your pack is restless," she replied, using proper Luparian body language to show respect. "Are the current living Arrangements not meeting your needs. Fang was so surprised he almost forgot to maintain his alpha posture. No guard had ever asked about their needs or acknowledged his leadership status. They had always tried to communicate with pack members individually, which went against everything Luparian society was based on. The sleeping arrangements go against our nature, he admitted after a long pause. We need to maintain proper pack spacing for security and comfort, but your cells force us into positions that make us feel vulnerable and isolated. Instead of dismissing this as a security risk, Hannah nodded thoughtfully. Show me what you mean. What followed was the strangest security consultation in prison history. Fang led Hana and Jiwoo through the pack area, explaining how Luparian social structure worked. The alpha and beta wolves needed to be positioned where they could see all pack members. The younger wolves needed to be close enough to older ones for guidance, but far enough apart to avoid territorial conflicts. Pack member Howell, who served as the group's scout, explained that the current cell arrangement made them feel exposed to attack from behind. Pack member Storm, the group's hunter, said the feeding schedule conflicted with their natural rhythms, making them constantly hungry and irritable. Hannah listened to everything, taking notes and asking detailed questions. She treated each pack member with the respect due to their position in the hierarchy when she spoke to subordinate pack members. She first got permission from Alpha Fang. This is wrong, Fang thought to himself. All the other guards either ignored pack structure completely or tried to break it down. This human is strengthening our bonds by respecting them. Over the next week, Hana worked with the prison engineers to redesign Block 15. They created a communal area where the pack could maintain their natural social spacing while still being securely contained. They adjusted feeding times to match Luparian hunting schedules and provided activities that allowed the pack to work together on non-threatening projects. The transformation was remarkable. The pack went from planning escape attempts to helping maintain order in their section. When new prisoners arrived, the Luparians would calm them down and explain the rules. They started mediating disputes between prisoners from different species. Pack member Silver, who had been the most aggressive during previous escape attempts, became almost protective of the guards. She would position herself between human guards and potentially dangerous situations, not to threaten, but to help. Alpha Fang requested a meeting with Captain Hana to discuss something important. Human, he said, your pack understands ours better than any species we have encountered. Your pack structure is not that different from human military units. Hana explained, we learned long ago that trying to break up effective teams usually makes them less cooperative, not more. When we respect your natural organization, you can focus on positive goals instead of fighting against an unnatural environment. Fang nodded slowly. On our world, packs that work together survive, packs that fight against each other die. You have given us a way to survive together in this place. The other alien guards could not understand how the most dangerous group in the prison had become the most helpful. The Luparian pack was now assisting with prisoner integration, helping resolve conflicts, and even providing security intelligence about potential problems. Guard Park Jiwoo had developed a particular friendship with Storm, the pack hunter. They would discuss tracking techniques and survival skills. Storm taught Jiwoo about reading scent trails and interpreting subtle environmental changes, while Jiwoo shared human knowledge about navigation and resource management. The pack had also started teaching other prisoners about cooperation and teamwork. Their natural leadership abilities were being channeled into positive community building instead of escape planning. One evening, Alpha Fang approached Captain Hana with an unusual request. Human, our pack has been thinking we want to help train your guards about working with other species. We have observed many different prisoner types and we understand pack dynamics. You want to help train the guards? Hana asked. Your humans understand that cooperation works better than conflict, he said. Our pack understands how different species think and behave together. Maybe we can teach others what you taught us. This was an incredible development. Prisoners volunteering to help improve prison operations was unheard of, but it made perfect sense. Luparians were natural teachers and leaders. Within their social structure, Captain Hana agreed to a trial program where pack members would help orient new guards about prisoner psychology and species-specific needs. The program was so successful that other prisons began requesting information about the techniques, but the real test of everything the humans had accomplished was about to come: the galactic prison. Authority had heard rumors about the impossible improvements at the facility, and they were sending inspectors to investigate. Tomorrow would determine whether human methods could be accepted by the rest of the galaxy, or whether they would be forced to return to the old ways of managing prisons through force and fear. 6 months had passed since the human guards arrived at the prison, and Warden Talon was staring at statistics that seemed impossible. The numbers on his desk showed the most dramatic transformation in prison management that anyone in the galaxy had ever recorded. Escape attempts were down 90% from the previous year. Guard injuries had dropped to almost zero. Prisoner violence had decreased so dramatically that many security protocols were no longer necessary. The prison that had been the most dangerous assignment in the galaxy was now being requested as a preferred posting by guards from dozens of species. Other wardens from across the galaxy were calling every day asking how the impossible had been achieved. The Galactic Prison Authority was demanding detailed reports about the human methods. 3 other maximum security facilities had already requested human guard transfers, but today was the biggest test yet. A full inspection team from the Galactic Council was arriving to evaluate whether human techniques could be approved for system-wide implementation. The team included representatives from 12 different species, and they had the authority to either expand the human program or shut it down completely. Inspector Vex was a tall crystalline being from the Quartz Dominion. His species was known for logical thinking and strict adherence to established protocols. He had been managing prisons for over 200 years and had never seen anything like the reports. From this facility with him came Inspector Thoric, a massive Gorillian who believed that strength was the only language prisoners understood. Inspector Zyla, a quick-thinking Zentari who specialized in advanced security technology, and 9 other experts who represented the most experienced prison authorities in known space. They expected to find either fabricated records or a facility on the verge of collapse. What they found instead was something that challenged everything they thought they knew about criminal containment. The first thing they noticed was the atmosphere. The prison felt different from other maximum security facilities. Instead of the constant tension and barely controlled violence that characterized most prisons, there was a sense of calm purpose. Prisoners moved through the corridors without the desperate energy of caged animals. Guards walked their routes without the heavy weapons and defensive postures that were standard elsewhere. Human guards were often seen talking casually with prisoners from different species. Some prisoners were actually helping with facility maintenance and administration. This is highly irregular. Inspector Vex announced to Warden Talon prisoners should not be interacting freely with guards. The risk of manipulation and security breaches is enormous. Let me show you around the facility, Talon replied. We can discuss the methods after you see the results. They started with Block 7, where Guard Park Hyman was finishing his shift. Gorks, the massive Brutanian who had once been the most violent prisoner in the facility, was teaching a younger Brutanian about proper nutrition and exercise techniques. The inspection team watched in amazement as the 12-foot-tall creature, who had injured 6 guards, now calmly discussed meal planning and conflict resolution. Gorks had become a mentor figure for other prisoners, helping them adapt to prison life in positive ways. When did this prisoner last attempt violence? Inspector Thoric asked, expecting to hear about recent incidents. 8 months ago, Talon replied, when he realized the kitchen staff was making him sick with improper food. Once Guard Hyman helped resolve his dietary needs, the aggressive behavior stopped completely. But surely you maintain constant surveillance and restraints. Actually, no, Hyman said, approaching the group. Gorks moves freely within his section during designated hours. He helps with heavy lifting tasks and serves as a peer counselor for other Brutanian prisoners. Inspector Thoric was speechless. A prisoner who could crush steel with his bare hands was being allowed to move freely and work unsupervised. It went against every principle of prison security he had ever learned. They moved to Block 9, where Guard Li Taeyong was conducting what he called a cultural discussion group. Nephis, the Shadowkin, who had escaped 17 times, was leading a conversation about interspecies communication. Several prisoners from different worlds were sharing perspectives about their home cultures. This is preposterous, Inspector Zyla declared. The most escape-prone prisoner in the galaxy is running educational programs. How do you prevent her from phasing through the walls she chooses not to? Taeyang explained. We provided her with intellectual stimulation, social connection, and respect for her cultural background. She no longer wants to escape because she has found something more valuable than freedom. When did she last attempt escape? 14 weeks ago, when she realized she could help other prisoners understand each other better. She stopped focusing on leaving in. Block 12, the inspection team found guard Choi Yuna working with Zephyr to create artistic flame displays that told stories. From different worlds, the Pyrothean who had once been kept in a freezing torture chamber was now using his abilities to create beauty instead of destruction. The flaming chamber you built for him, Inspector Vex said, studying the heat-resistant room. This must have been extremely expensive, less expensive than repairing the damage from his previous escape attempts, Yuna replied. And the positive impact on prison morale has been incredible. Other prisoners request to watch his performances. It has become a form of interspecies cultural exchange, but Block 15 provided the biggest shock of all. The Luparian Pact, that had been the most dangerous group in any galactic prison, was now running orientation programs for new prisoners. Alpha Fang was explaining pack dynamics to a group of young guards while pack members demonstrated coordination techniques. You have turned the most violent criminals into prison administrators, Inspector Thorax said in disbelief. How is this possible? We stopped treating them like criminals and started treating them like people, Captain Kim Hanna said, joining the group. Each of these individuals was acting out because their basic needs were not being met. Once we addressed those needs, their behavior changed completely. The inspection team spent 3 days reviewing every aspect of the prison operations. They interviewed prisoners, guards, and staff members. They examined security footage and incident reports. They analyzed cost breakdowns and efficiency measurements. Finally, Inspector Vex called a meeting with Captain Hanna to understand the methods that had achieved these impossible results. Captain, the Council needs to understand how humans succeeded where every other species has failed. Your techniques appear to violate every established principle of prison security, yet your results are undeniable. Captain Hanna sat across from the 12-member inspection team, looking small compared to